عدم التشبث بمعادلات خشبية جامدة.
الأفق ليس مسدودا.
Good afternoon on this Sunday, March 9th. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's headlines. Foreign Minister Jabdan Basir stresses that terrorism cannot be justified by religion or any other excuse, warning against the spread of the phenomenon in Lebanon and the rest of the world. Maronite Patriarch Shadadai says the Turkish Charter could help officials end disputes that are hindering an agreement on the government's policy statement. And the head of the Orthodox Council, Robert Abyad, says that the nuns kidnapped in Syria's Ma'lula region are expected to be released later during the day. Foreign Minister Jabdan Basir is stressing that terrorism cannot be justified by religion or any other excuse, warning against the spread of the phenomenon in Lebanon as well as the rest of the Arab world. He says, quote, "We fear that Lebanon will become a passageway for jihadists." He made these remarks during the opening of the Arab Foreign Ministers meeting in Cairo, Egypt. The solution lies in properly equipping the army, he added, while hoping that the upcoming Rome conference aimed at bolstering the army will fulfill this demand. He asked his gatherers, quote, "Can you believe that in the country of coexistence, some individuals have taken the path of suicide bombing as a result of the political and religious environment that harbors such sentiments?" Basir said combating terrorism in Lebanon requires the proper equipping of the army. Maronite Patriarch Shadadai is noting that the Turkish Charter could help officials end disputes that are hindering an agreement on the government's policy statement. He said during his Sunday sermon that he is urging officials to rise above their personal interests and seek Lebanon's interests through approving a policy statement. He remarked that the disputes thwarting the drafting of the statement are not more important than higher national interests and the Constitution. Adai stressed that the new government is tasked with staging the presidential elections on time of the election of the new president, and that is the main factor in the rise of the state. He continued that it was shameful and an insult to national dignity to hear some sides speak of vacuum and the possibility of postponing the elections. And it has made history. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of Beirut just yesterday to demand that politicians approve Lebanon's first law against domestic violence in a nonpartisan display rarely seen in Lebanon's highly politicized climate. The people want the passage of the law, protesters chanted outside the Ministry of Justice, invoking one of the most popular slogans of the Arab Spring uprisings, many carrying pictures of women. The demonstration, called to coincide with International Women's Day, appeared to number at least 3,000 people, large for a politically independent event, even in Beirut. Maya Ammar from the Kafa organization, which literally translates as Enough, a group supporting abused women, participated in the march, and they said that participation was to demand legal change protecting women from domestic violence. Many Lebanese took to social media following the death last month of Manal Asi and Christelle Abu Shara to condemn a 7-month delay in passing the domestic violence law held up by political disagreements. The international community views President Michel Sleiman as a factor that contributes to Lebanon's stability and security given the critical regional situation. This is according to the Kuwaiti Al-Anba Daily. To that end, the international community, according to the newspaper, will likely advocate that his term be extended in order to preserve the stability and avoid any political vacuum in the country. This is according to a source that informed with the decisions and that took place at the International Support Group meeting on Lebanon that was held last Wednesday in Paris. It explained that world powers are keen to avoid vacuum, which will either lead to the election of a new president or force Sleiman to stay in his post until the situation in the region becomes clear. The Lebanese powers will most likely fail to agree on a presidential candidate given the great differences between them and their commitments to foreign powers that determine their political choices in such affairs. Sleiman's term ends on May 25th. Repercussions of the Syrian conflict on Lebanon, while a number of rockets fired from the Syrian side of the border landed in the northern region of Akkad. The rockets fired at dawn landed in the towns located near the Kabir or Grand River near the Lebanese-Syrian border. 2 2 rockets landed on the house of Sheikh Aboud al-Zuhbi in the town of Ammar al-Bikat, causing material damage. However, no one was injured in the attack. On Saturday, rockets fired from Syria landed in the Bakar regions of Hirmil and Laqaa. Other rockets also targeted the Akkar towns of Kashlak, Wadi Hur, Hikr Janin, and Ammar al-Bikat. Laqaa towns with a majority of Shia population have repeatedly come under rocket attacks by either rebels seeking to topple Syrian President Bashar al-Assad regime or armed men supporting them. The Syrian troops loyal to President Bashar al-Assad also continue to carry out air raids on Arsail, a majority of Sunni town, which is an escape route for rebels and smugglers. Breaking news today, 13 nuns who were kidnapped last year from the historic Christian town of Ma'lula in Syria may be released later in the day. This is according to local and Syrian media outlets. And as a Qatari intelligence chief is arriving in Lebanon to discuss the issue, President Michel Sleiman followed up the possible release with Lebanon's General Security Chief, Major General Abbas Ibrahim, who was tasked by the government with handling the kidnapping case. Quoting Arab media sources, a pro-regime Syrian news agency said a deal has been reached to release the nuns, who it said were captured by the Nusra Front, the radical Islamist group fighting President Bashar al-Assad's forces. Meanwhile, the head of the Qatari intelligence, Saad al-Kabaisi, arrived at the airport to reportedly follow up on the case. Qatar has become a vital player in the ongoing negotiations to release the nuns, along with Ibrahim, who was successful in releasing the 9 Lebanese pilgrims kidnapped in Syria last year. Coming up next, the missing Malaysia plane may have turned back, according to authorities fearing the worst. Stay with us for the updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The Israeli army is unloading its ship, which it intercepted in the Red Sea, allegedly transporting arms from Iran to Gaza, and escorted it to the port of Eilat. Naval commandos seized the vessel on Wednesday in the Red Sea between Eritrea and Sudan, and it was escorted into Eilat on Saturday by 2 Israeli warships. The military said it was carrying an Iranian shipment of M302 rockets destined for the Gaza Strip, which is controlled by the Palestinian Islamist movement Hamas. The Army Chief, Lieutenant General Benny Gantz, said each one of those rockets poses a threat to the safety of the citizens of Israel. Each bullet and each rocket that was discovered had an Israeli address. The military is to hold a news conference on Monday to display the seized weaponry. Iran has flatly denied any involvement with the shipment, which the Israeli army said was carrying missiles capable of striking anywhere in the Jewish state. EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton says a final accord on Iran's nuclear program cannot be guaranteed during a landmark visit that underscores a thaw in Tehran's ties with the West. Ashton is in Tehran on an official visit that comes after Iran signed a preliminary deal in November with world powers under which it agreed to curb its disputed nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief. The breakthrough was made possible after last year's election of Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, viewed as a relative moderate who has the ear of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
I think we all know the significance of trying to make progress on the nuclear issue, and as you know, we've started the talks on what we hope will lead to a final and comprehensive agreement. It will be difficult, there's a lot to do. There have been experts meetings going on in Vienna in these last few days, and they have started to address the detail, to drill down, and we'll meet again in Vienna shortly. But the purpose of this visit was to respond to the invitation of the Foreign Minister in my capacity as the EU High Representative. I think it is extremely important at one level, and that is that we've responded, because I come on behalf of the European Union, to the outreach that's been clear from President Rouhani, from Foreign Minister Zarif, and we've come to establish for ourselves a situation here in terms of the potential for the relationship. But we also recognise that that relationship is in many ways dependent on whether Iran, by dealing with the nuclear issue, demonstrates that it is clearly looking for a different role.
In Iraq, a suicide bomber killed 21 people, including 2 state television employees, at a checkpoint near Baghdad after the premier accused Riyadh and Doha of fueling bloodshed in the country. Iraq has been hit by a year-long surge in violence that has reached levels not seen since 2008, driven principally by widespread discontent among its Sunni Arab minority and by the civil war in neighboring Syria. Analysts and diplomats have urged Iraq's Shia-led authorities to reach out to disaffected Sunnis, but with elections due next month, political leaders have not wanted to be seen to compromise and have instead pursued a hard line against militants. The suicide bomber detonated an explosives-rigged minibus during morning rush hour at a checkpoint at the northern entrance of Hilla, the confessionally mixed but mostly Shia capital of Babel province south of Baghdad. The attack killed 21 and left 120 others wounded, a provincial councillor, police and a doctor. The Malaysian authorities are announcing that they are now investigating the possibility a missing Malaysian Airlines plane had turned back before disappearing and were widening the search area accordingly. As the search of the Malaysian Airlines flight continues into a second day, Malaysian aviation authorities said it was fearing the worst, and the radar displays indicated the plane could have turned around. No other problems had been reported in the area before the plane dropped out of contact, and the pilots did not send a distress signal, something that has been highlighted by experts as unusual for a modern jetliner. There was still no confirmed sighting of wreckage from the Boeing 777 in the seas between Malaysia and Vietnam, where it vanished from screens early on Saturday morning en route to Beijing from Kuala Lumpur. The identities of 4 passengers on board the missing jetliner are being investigated over airline security fears as planes and ships from across Asia resume the hunt for the plane that disappeared with 239 people on board. Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk vowed Ukraine would not give an inch of its territory to Russia at a rally of thousands of people in Kiev in honor of 19th century national hero Taras Shevchenko. "This is our land," he said. "We will not give an inch of it to Russia. Russia and its president should know that," Yatsenyuk said after Russian forces and pro-Kremlin gunmen seized control of Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula in the Black Sea. It comes as clashes erupted between pro-Ukrainians and pro-Russians at Sevastopol. In Simferopol, hundreds gathered at a pro-Russia rally in front of a statue of Lenin. Trouble in the ex-Soviet state has continued as the government is struggling to contain upheaval amid a standoff between Russia and the West over Crimea that shows no sign of easing. Sunday marks 200 years since the birth of Ukraine's national hero, the poet Taras Shevchenko, and patriotic rallies were held in Kiev and in a show of defiance of Russia's de facto control over Crimea, the peninsula's key cities of Simferopol and Sevastopol. Fugitive WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has hinted that new leaks would be coming from WikiLeaks, but gave no details of what or when this might be. Assange was speaking over Skype on Saturday from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he has been confined since June of 2012. His comments come during a streaming video interview beamed to an audience of 3,500 attendees of the South by Southwest Interactive Festival in Austin in the U.S. state of Texas, during which he discussed government surveillance, journalism, and the situation in Ukraine. Assange also addressed the issue of government surveillance of its citizens. He has taken asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy in London to avoid extradition to Sweden over a sexual assault charge, which he has said would be merely a first step in efforts to move him to the U.S. to face charges over publishing hundreds of thousands of secret government documents. On that note, we end our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our top stories. Foreign Minister Jabdan Basir stresses terrorism cannot be justified by religion or any other excuse, warning against the spread of it in Lebanon and the rest of the Arab world. Maronite Patriarch Shadadai says the Turkey Charter could help officials end disputes that are hindering an agreement on the government's policy statement. And the head of the Orthodox Council, Robert Abyad, says that the nuns kidnapped in Syria's Ma'lula region are expected to be released later during the day. Those end your week here live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal, wishing you a great week ahead. Take care.
إلى عدم التشبث بمعادلات خشبية جامدة.
الأفق ليس مسدودا.